My name's Matt Hiltermann, and I am here today to talk to you about sashes. So the sash is one of the major symbols of the Métis people, our history, and our culture. But it's got a history and uses of its own that have developed over the course of a couple hundred years. So the origins of the sash are actually kind of obscure. We don't really know where finger weaving came from or who did it first. There are some sources that point to it originating with the French, and others pointing to it originating with the people around where the Missouri and Mississippi rivers meet in the eastern woodlands. And the best explanation I've really been able to come to, and this is by no means hard fact, but it's my understanding, is that the sashes we know it today, the arrow sash, evolved as the result of trade and exchange between French fur traders and the First Nations living in that region. Now, by the time we really have solid records for the sash, or solid accounts of it, it already seems to have evolved to something at least fairly familiar to our modern eyes. So the first sashes you would have seen in the late 1700s, I shouldn't say the first you would have seen, the first that we really have strong records for, were actually these double chevron styles. This isn't the historically correct color scheme, but it shows you what the pattern would have looked like. And these were popular around the everywhere from the Great Lakes to the Athabasca country and down into the Missouri. And a lot of other cultures wore them as well, including the Métis, but not limited to. So by the 18 teens, you start to see people experimenting with patterns more and more. And that's when you get this really iconic Assumption style sash. In French, it's called la ceinture fléchée, which means arrow belt. And you can see quite clearly here the arrows at the center that give it that name. While these patterns, this pattern was really common, you do see some variation of color schemes throughout the 1800s. But this was the go-to sash you would have seen Métis men wearing in the 1800s. Originally, it was produced in Assumption, Quebec, which is why it's called an Assumption sash. But by the 1830s and 40s, the St. Boniface Academy and the Red River Collegiate had begun to teach finger weaving at Red River. Interestingly, the Catholic St. Boniface Academy taught it as a craft to girls, whereas the Red River Collegiate taught it to boys. So is it a man's craft? Is it a woman's craft? No one knows. By the 1850s, advances in textile technology in the UK allowed places like Manchester and Coventry to produce cheaper loom woven sashes as an alternative to the finger woven ones. To put in perspective what that price difference would have looked like, this one this finger woven one would sell for about $1,500 today. This loomed one would be about $150. So you're looking at about 1/10 the price. So these were popular for people who couldn't afford the handmade ones, but still wanted to, represent, as it were. Now, the ones we see most often today, these ones actually originated in the 50s as part of Calnibad in Quebec, and were basically an homage to these loom woven ones, which in turn were an homage to the finger woven ones. So you can see how with each degree of technology, the pattern gets a little more abstracted. Now, that's not to say that these sashes aren't traditional in a sense. The Métis culture and tradition is a living, breathing, and constantly evolving culture. And today, these are very much a part of our tradition. However, they weren't necessarily historical in that they were used in the 1800s. The old-time sashes would have looked much more like this. Now, these sashes had a variety of uses. Ropes, tump lines, emergency sewing kits with the fringes. Now, the use I find most compelling, though, is as a weightlifting belt. Now, not a lot of people talk about that one. Hear me out. I have worked in a variety of museums and lifted a lot of fur bales over the years, and I can tell you from experience that it is a lot easier and puts a lot less stress on your abdomen and back if you're wearing a sash. People can disagree with me on that, but I will die on this hill. Yeah, so those are some of the uses and a bit of the history of the sash. Now, the finger woven sash I have here is a very complex pattern. You're not going to learn that overnight. Even this chevron, it takes a bit of practice to get to this point. So what I'll be showing you today, it's a very basic pattern, but it's the one I start all my students with. It's called a stipple, and it's just like a diagonal stripe. And that's really the best place to start weaving. So without further ado, let's begin. So finger weaving is a really versatile activity because you can do it just about anywhere. All you need is some yarn, something to use as a dowel. You can use pens, pencils, chopsticks, knitting needles, basically anything that you can tie the yarn to at the center. I usually try to work from the center because I find it easier to manage less yarn. And the last thing you need is something to tie it to. I have a coat rack here. You can also use chairs, shelves, coat hooks. Basically, if you can tie it on, you can use it. So yeah, the three things you need: yarn, dowel, something to tie to. So for tying this on, you're gonna actually want to wrap it around itself, not once, but twice. And that just strengthens it a bit so it doesn't come loose. And then you pull it to give yourself a bit of tension. Now once all that, you want to try and make sure that the threads are towards the center of your dowel so that it doesn't twist like mine's doing. Yeah, there we go. So what you're going to do next is you're going to separate your threads. Now, on a stipple, which is what we call this pattern with alternating colors, you're going to want to take whatever color is furthest to your left and drop it, and then the next color, all of those threads will come up. So all the reds are going to go down, and all the yellows are going to come up, like so. And that's how you establish your what's called the shed, which is the unwoven part here. Now, once you have that in place, you're going to do what I like to call crab grab. So you put the bottom of the shed between your index and middle finger, and the top of your shed in between your index finger and thumb. And so you're going to do the crab grab with your left hand, and with your right hand, you're going to reach through the center of the shed, and you're going to grab and pinch the bottom left thread. You're going to pull it through the shed, in between the reds and the yellows, and you're going to take it out and just get it out of the way, tie it around something, and make sure it can't interfere. From there, you're going to take your top left thread and drop it. Just let it go. Pick up the bottom left, hold it in your hand no matter what. Now you drop the next top left. Don't let go of the red one when you drop the yellow. Now you pick up the next red, so you should have two reds in your left hand. You drop the last yellow, don't let it spin like I just did. And you grab the outsider, and you give it a nice little tug, and your pattern begins. So that's the first row. Now you'll notice that the color that was on the bottom before, the red, is now on top, and the color that was on top, the yellow, is now on the bottom. But that doesn't change what I do with the threads. I still start by crab grabbing with my left hand, reach through the middle, reach through the shed, and grab the bottom left, pull it through the shed in between the two colors, and take it out, wrap it around, and just get it out of the way. And now you're going to crab grab with your right hand again, and with your left hand, you take the top left and drop it. Then you pick up the bottom left and hold it in your hand. You drop the top, pick up the bottom, drop the top, pick up the outsider. Yeah. So again, you take the bottom left thread. So you're going to crab grab with your left hand, with your right hand through the shed, grab the bottom left, pull it out, get it out of the way, wrap it around something just to keep it from getting mingled back in, and switch hands. With your left hand, you're going to take the top left thread and drop it at the bottom and hold it in your hand. Don't let go no matter what. You're going to drop the next top thread, pick up the next bottom, and drop the last top. Then you grab the outsider, bring him back in with his friends, and give the whole thing a tiny little tug. Not too tight, just enough to make it snug. And then you repeat. Except now the red is on the bottom and the yellow is on the top. So now you take the bottom left again. Doesn't matter which color is on the top, which color is on the bottom. You always go for that bottom left when you're doing this stipple pattern. Then you switch hands. Drop the top left, pick up the bottom, drop the top, pick up the bottom, drop the top, pick up the outsider, and give it all a tiny tug. And repeat. So bottom left, through the shed, up and out. Switch hands, drop the top, pick up the bottom, drop the top, pick up the bottom, drop the top, pick up the outsider, and give it a tiny little tug. And so on and so forth. Oh, I forgot to mention, to tie it onto the dowel, we use what's called a clove hitch. I didn't show that because apparently my way of teaching it isn't the most effective, but you can look it up on Google. It's pretty easy to find how to do a clove hitch, and clove hitches are really nice because when you slide the dowel out, they just come undone. It's great. Anyways, so back to the weaving, as with before. Once I've got my outsider secured, I then switch hands, and going from left to right, I drop the top, pick up the bottom, drop the top, pick up the bottom, drop the top, pick up the outsider, and repeat. And when you're doing this, always remember to do that crab grab with your with the top of the shed between your thumb and index, and the bottom of the shed between your index and middle. So whether you're doing it with your left or your right, you should always be trying to, you should be mindful of doing the crab grab. All right. So again, left, crab grab left, grab the bottom left thread, pull it through the shed, up and out. Then you switch, drop the top, pick up the bottom, drop the top, pick up the bottom, drop the top, grab the outsider, and so on and so forth. And yeah, really, most of this process is just repeating over and over again until you get to the end. And once you get to the end, there are a couple things you can do. Usually you're at the end when the threads feel too short to really handle, when you feel like your hands or arms are, you're having trouble keeping the threads in your hands. That's usually a sign you should finish it off. It's getting a little short, so I'm just going to put that in my hand. But you do still want to keep that last one separate. Alright, so they're getting a little bit too short to really manage here. As you'll notice, I'm having trouble even getting them to the pen. So I'm probably going to want to finish this side off pretty soon. Now, finishing off a side, there's a few options. You can just tie a knot and basically make like a pom-pom out of it, for lack of a better term. Or you can twist your fringes or braid them. So I personally really like braided fringes. Twisted fringes, you can get a fringe twister, but I find it kind of chafes your hand to do manually. And the pom-pom style just isn't, I don't think it's particularly aesthetic, but to each their own. But yeah, so what I do with the braids is I'll separate my colors into their two respective ones. So now there's 3 of each, and you just braid it like you would with hair or really anything else. And then once you get to the bottom of the braid, you're gonna need to knot it, because otherwise the braid will come undone, and if the braid comes undone, then the weave comes undone, and everything comes undone. So it's really important that whenever you finish your braid, you tie a knot at the end of the braid to keep it done. And it's actually not going to be at the very end of the string. You're going to want to allow maybe ½ an inch to for the threads. I'll just show you. Yeah, because if you do the knot too close to the bottom, it comes undone pretty easily. but if you do it like even half an inch up, it's easier to keep it done up. So I would say about there's a good spot. I'm going to slide that down so it's not all perfect. Yeah, so this little guy here, that's about how much thread you want at the end of your fringes. Just a little bit so that the knot can come down too easy. And you're going to want to do this with both colors. So go for the red. Yeah, like I said, it's just like braiding hair. So once you've got your fringes braided and tied, the next thing you'll do is cut off any excess. So this part of it you'd be able to cut off, and then that's that side done. And once you finish the first half, you take off the weave off your anchor. So we get that knot out, and yeah. So we've done the first half. Now you can tie the woven part to your anchor. So I like to usually tie the fringes on, because then it's like nicely divided in half, like so. And then slide your dowel off and give it a tug, and the knot's coming down. And you do need to figure out which way is up. So there's there we go. That's what we want. So the way that's up, as you might gather, is the way that you'd basically be continuing as you did before. So again, bottom left, up and out, switch hands, down, up, up, and so on and so forth. I'm not really sure that there's much more to say. Once you get to the other end, you braid it again, and that's your first mini sash. Now this pattern is pretty simple, but once you master it, you can work your way up to more and more threads, and even there's some good books available on the subject. So this is just the basics, but hopefully this has allowed you to get started on some finger weaving projects of your own. As you can see, I have finished my little bracelet here. This simple stipple pattern, it's not much, but 12 years ago when I started weaving, this is what I started with. Nowadays, I produce sashes like this quite regularly. So, you know, with enough practice, you really can get from this to this. It just takes time. But as long as you keep practicing your weaving, you will eventually be able to get to that level. And it all starts with a little bracelet like so. I've been Matt Hiltermann. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and share. And if you have a chance to try this at home, please share your weaving projects with us in the comments. All the best.